and look at some things that Jesus said. This is in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 6. Matthew chapter 6, I want to begin reading with verse 19. Jesus makes pretty much the same point, but just uses a little bit different language. And I want to start with verse 19. Matthew chapter 6, beginning in verse 19, he says this, "Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." Now, is Jesus saying in these verses that you can't have a bank account and that you shouldn't have a savings account? No, I don't think he really is. I think he's using that as an example. I think the main point he's trying to make here, or he is making, is he's talking not about where you store your money, but where your heart is. I think the main point is, notice what he says is, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. You know, the thing I notice as I read the Bible is God's more concerned about our heart than anything else. He's more concerned about the condition of our heart, because he knows if the condition of our heart is right, everything else will eventually line up with that. But the main thing is the condition of our heart. Although this is not bad advice here when he says, "Lay not up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust doth corrupt." You know, it's true. You know, treasures on earth are vulnerable. They're vulnerable to thieves breaking through and stealing. Now, what he's saying here is, you know, you don't have to think that you have to create some kind of a pile of cash to trust in for your life. You've got a heavenly Father, and where your heart is, that's where your treasure is. Now, I don't think he's saying you shouldn't have money in your pocket and you shouldn't have a bank account, but I think he's saying is you shouldn't trust in that. You see what the difference is? He's talking about where is your heart. Where your heart is, there is where your treasure. Or what do you love? What do you focus your, as Paul said, where do you set your affections on? It says, where your treasure is, there is your heart also. He goes on to say in verse 22, "The light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. But if thy eye be evil, thy whole body shall be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in thee is darkness, how great is that darkness?" Now this is archaic language to say, what he means is when he says, and when he talks about the eye, he means what you're focused on, what you're looking at. When he says the eye, he means what's your central focus. When he says the light of the body is the eye, if your eye therefore be single, what he means is if your attention is not divided, if your allegiance is not divided, if your affection in the thing that you're focused on and pursuing is not divided but single, in other words, if your treasure in your heart is in heaven, then he says your life is full of light. That's what he's saying here. Now, I agree. This is sort of old language, and we don't usually use this kind of. We don't use it at all. In verse 23, when he says, "If thine eye be evil," or in other words, not single, if it's divided, if your allegiance is divided, or if your heart is divided, then it creates darkness in your life. So he's encouraging us to let our affection and our focus and our attention be single on the things of God. Then if you didn't get that from these verses, verse 24 makes it plain. Verse 24 says, "No man can serve two masters." See, that's what he's been saying about your eye or your attention being single. You can't serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. Now, I like the King James Bible, and I like to read from it, but listen, let's be honest, it uses a lot of words that we don't use today. In my vocabulary, the word mammon is not there. I do not use the word mammon. And when I read the King James Bible and see a word like that, I have to go and look it up. And the best explanation I can find for that word is it means basically a pile of riches that you put all your trust in. That's basically what it means. A big pile of money that you say, now I'm safe. You know, if I can just pile up a big enough pile of cash, then I can trust in that and forget about God. That's the thought here. So what he's saying is, again, I don't believe that Jesus is saying you should go through life with no money and poor and your shoes worn out and your knees worn out in your pants and let's be honest. I don't think that's what he's saying, but I think he is saying is you don't have to think that you have to put your trust in a big pile of cash. And frankly, I don't have a big pile of cash to trust in anyway, so I'm not I'm not too worried about that. But really, the world. Remember what I just read to you, the quote from Augustine, the two communities. The world, that's what the world thinks. People in the world who basically are not really paying attention to God, That's what they think. If I can just accumulate enough cash, then I'll be set. But guess what? You can accumulate a lot of cash and then the bottom can fall out and it can all be gone. Is that right? That is right. But we have something that the bottom's never going to fall out. We have something that's eternal that we can trust in. The only thing is, it's God, and we don't. It's not something that we control. It's something that we allow to control us. So he says, no man can serve two masters, for either he'll love the one, hate the other, or else he'll hold to the one and despise the other. You can't serve God, and I'm going to say a big pile of cash. I therefore say to you, verse 25, take no thought for your life. Or another way to say it is, do not have any anxiety about your life, what you shall eat, what you shall drink, nor yet your body, what you shall put on. For the life is not the life more than meat, and the body more than raiment. Then in verse 26 he says, behold the fowls of the air, or the birds of the air, they sow not, neither do they reap, nor gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feedeth them. Are you not much better than they? Now again, let me make the point. Is he saying here that because he says, consider the birds of the air, they do not sow and they do not reap, is he saying we shouldn't sow and reap? Guess what? My income comes from farming. I don't get my income from the church. When you contribute to the church, it goes into the church bank account, and we pay the utilities and pay church expenses or pay for things like the Christmas child. But since I want to eat and I want to survive, my income comes from farming, and farming is all about sowing and reaping. And I've spent the last several weeks doing a whole lot of sowing. In fact, I'm going to try to finish it this afternoon. Finish my sowing before the weather changes. So is Jesus here telling me that I'm doing the wrong thing because he says consider the birds? See, just like before when he said in the previous verse, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth. What he's talking about, what he wants you to understand is, he's not saying don't sow, don't reap, but he says, what are you trusting in? Where is your trust? He's reminding us that the birds, they don't even do that. The birds don't go out and plant a farm. The birds don't go out and harvest, and they don't get on a combine and go out and put the wheat in a bin like we do. The birds don't do that, but he says your heavenly Father feeds them. And then he says, aren't you better than those? In other words, in the eyes of God, aren't you worth more than the birds? And the truth is, yes, you are. You are worth infinitely more than a bunch of birds in the sight of God. Anton, would you put up the Message translation on this verse? I like what the Message says here. Look at the birds, free and unfettered, not tied down to a job description. Look at this next phrase. Careless in the care of God. You like that? Or in other words, carefree in the care of God. I think that's a good way to say it. Carefree or careless. I don't like careless, sounds like you're sloppy, but no, carefree is what he means. Carefree in the care of God. And you count far more to him than birds. Free and unfettered. What he's trying to say is we as Christians have a God that's looking out for us that we can put our trust in. We don't have to put our trust in what we do. Now, we do work and we do, sow and reap and we do all those things, but we don't trust in all those things. You see, I don't ever lay awake in bed at night worrying about my farming and how's the wheat doing. Now, I hang around farmers sometimes. I know that a lot of them do. And they get in their pickup and they drive out there every day and look at it. Now, I don't understand why. As far as I'm concerned, once it's planted, there isn't much more I can do about it, And I don't go out there every day and look at it, and worry about it. What I think is I do my part, I do my work, but the rest is in God's hands. And I go to sleep every night carefree in the care of God, knowing that He cares for me. I don't have a worry in the world. And the truth is, it's not just me, you too. You don't have a worry in the world either. Now, we do the things that we do and take care of business in our lives, but we have a Father, you see. What he's saying is we have a heavenly Father that cares about us.